Health Beat with Dr. Benita Zahn.
COVID-19 is a confounding disease. Some people skate through the illness while others succumb to it. And in between, there are people who recover but endure lingering effects. There's new research out looking at the number of people who have not regained their sense of smell or taste. Put Sue Caputo in that category. She and her husband fell ill back in March. And while they've been donating their plasma to help other patients, they're still waiting for life as they knew it to return. Sue, it's good to see you.
Good to see you too, Benita.
Give us a sense. You got sick in, actually it was mid-February is when you started taking ill, and then your husband was in March. What are the symptoms that presented for you?
Initially, I had tremendous pain came in through my left eye. And then my organs, I could feel them shutting down and my lungs filling up with fluid. It was very frightening. I was able to expectorate the fluid in my lungs and then get better, but I certainly felt that if I was not able to get the fluid out of my lungs, I would have needed to go to the hospital.
You were never hospitalized. Your treatment all took place at home.
Yes.
And did you, I mean, this was so far back. COVID was just coming onto the radar at that point. Were there any medications prescribed for you?
No, not at all. My husband then became ill, and we first presented at Ellis Urgent Care, and they assumed that it was bronchitis. And they sent him home and told him to use a humidifier and to, stay in a dark room, which actually then he ended up getting worse. So we went to St. Peter's on March 13th, and we were finally able to get a requisition for a COVID test. The requisitions were impossible to get back then, and the doctors were scrambling to try and be able to prescribe them. So we presented at Memorial Hospital on the 14th of March, which is where he finally got tested, and we received the results on St. Patrick's Day that he was COVID positive.
How did you get tested?
There were no tests available for me, so it wasn't until after Ralph had gone through isolation and we'd been in mandatory quarantine that we enrolled in the Mount Sinai COVID plasma donation program, and we traveled down to Mount Sinai and they did the antibody tests. Part of the problem with me up here is I couldn't give plasma because I didn't have a negative COVID test, but I was certainly positive for the antibodies. So Mount Sinai was happy to take my plasma.
So you found out in a roundabout way. When you first got sick in the end of February, you didn't know that it was COVID. You only suspected.
Right. In fact, I didn't think it was until Ralph got sick.
At what point did you both realize you'd lost your sense of smell and sense of taste?
Mine was very abrupt. It was, I want to say around March 14th, I had gone out to get the mail because we were isolating, but not yet sure that it was COVID. And as I was coming back in from getting the mail, I felt like I smelled a foul odor in our house, and it was very disconcerting. So I actually took all of our sheets and pillows and blankets and every soft fabric that we had in the house, and I washed it, and I did tons and tons of laundry. And then the smell stopped, and I had nothing. I couldn't smell coffee. I couldn't smell, the garlic when I was cooking sauce. I couldn't smell the fresh air. I couldn't smell an evergreen. It was just gone.
It seems to me that would be frightening.
Well, during that whole process, everything was frightening. So the fact that we were surviving it somehow just made me feel fortunate that we were trying to get better, and the sense of smell was kind of like a secondary, we'll deal with that later. We'll figure out how to fix this or how to remedy it later. So here we are now in January, almost 10 months later, and it's still like when I smell coffee, I smell pepper. And when I taste green leafy vegetables, it tastes like chemicals. But I consider myself fortunate because Ralph is healthy and I am healthy, and so many people have lost their lives.
Yeah. Did Ralph also lose his sense of smell and taste?
He did. For him, it's a little bit different because he's always had sinus problems. And so he's gone in and out of having a great sense of smell and not having a great sense of smell. So for him, it wasn't quite as disconcerting. But yes, he also, we joke about it. We met with someone at my mother's house. And as soon as they walked in, they said, wow, it smells musty in here. And we looked at each other like we didn't know. So thank you for letting us know.
So usually the loss of sense of smell and taste comes early in a COVID diagnosis. For you, it was later. What did your doctor say about that?
I honestly haven't discussed it with my doctor because there's been so many other things going on. I think I might have mentioned it to her, that I don't have this, but it actually, I did lose it within a month or so because I believe I had COVID the end of February, and by March 14th it was gone. So it was relatively early.
Mm-hmm. Did you get sick all over again when Ralph was sick? Do you think perhaps you had something else and then you contracted COVID later when he in fact was COVID positive?
It's possible, but what's interesting about that was once he contracted the virus, I did have what I called a relapse of the first episode in February, but it happened the same way. It was my left eye, and then it started going through my body. And because I'd been through that once before, it wasn't as frightening to me, but I did have a minor, what I would call a relapse after Ralph got sick. So I don't understand it. We're part of this study. I think they're trying to figure out what the different symptoms are and why they present differently for different people.
Mm-hmm. So what's life like now for you with this very limited, ongoing sense of smell and taste?
Well, I'm trying to relearn and to remember, because I always loved big, healthy salads and green leafy vegetables. So I try and force myself to continue to eat them, even though it tastes like chemicals. And like I think I mentioned to you before, I had actually gone out and bought really expensive organic vegetables thinking maybe I was tasting the chemicals. I was hypersensitive to the chemicals. But even the expensive organic vegetables taste like chemicals to me. But I try and retrain my brain, remember that it's still good for me. Just, do what you have to do and eat it. And maybe someday it'll come back.
And you and Ralph have continued to donate plasma to help others.
We've donated twice. We like I said, we enrolled at the Mount Sinai plasma donation program, and they are connected with the New York Blood Center. So we travel down to Elmsford, New York, and we've given plasma twice. And through this whole process, when we leave the plasma donation center, that is the time that we feel best. Those were the two best days that we've had since this whole thing happened. So I can tell people that if you do go through something like this, if you have the ability to give your plasma, it makes you feel better. So
because you're helping others.
Yeah. And you don't feel helpless. It's like the one time during this whole journey that we felt like we were in control, that we could do something about it, that we could do something for other people. And when you think about how many people have died, 1.87 million people worldwide have died of this disease. And, when I think about Nick Cordero a lot, the 41-year-old actor in Manhattan who died, and I'm inspired by his wife who has to go on, Amanda Klutz, and people like that. And so we will continue to give as long as they want our plasma. As long as we have antibodies, we are happy to give.
And what's the study looking at, this study at Mount Sinai in the city?
It's plasmapheresis. And what they're doing is they are taking the convalescent plasma. They are tracking as far as how well we're surviving, how long the antibodies stay in the system. Ralph's antibodies, I'd have to log onto the site to get you the exact numbers, but I believe Ralph's antibodies at the last time we donated were 2880 and mine were 990. So he is off the charts with antibodies, and I've got a good amount. So then they take the convalescent plasma, they freeze it immediately, and then it's used for patients who are in the hospital suffering from COVID. And somehow it helps their own system fight the disease.
Before I let you go, I'm just a little bit confused. You couldn't donate plasma in Albany because why? And that sent you looking for where you could?
Yeah, well, back then when we were looking, which was the end of March, the Albany area, we needed to have a negative COVID test for me, a positive COVID test for me, I'm sorry. Back then, we needed to have a positive COVID test for me or they wouldn't see you. They weren't taking donations. That's how they differentiated. They had to make a determination of whose plasma they were going to take. So they didn't want to take people that were not confirmed to be COVID positive. Down at Mount Sinai, they said, come on in, we'll test you for antibodies. So I went in with, it was wonderful, actually, the day that we were there at Mount Sinai, because there were a lot of young people in Manhattan who wanted to find out if they had antibodies. So it was like Ralph and I and a sea full of young people getting their blood tested for antibodies. And Mount Sinai was happy to test for antibodies and then put you into the plasma program if you tested positive for the antibodies.
And the problem was you couldn't find somebody who would test you to see if you were in fact positive, and because of the way things were at that time. Just crazy, Sue.
It was pretty much impossible to get a requisition back on March, in mid-March.
And how are you both feeling? Yeah, I'm sorry, how are you both feeling now, besides the lack of sense, the sense of smell and taste?
We feel great. There are some residual repercussions. Ralph's right now working out. He's, we're trying to keep healthy and strong. There are some, I think, breathing long-term issues that we're still experiencing as far as being able to take deep breaths. And, we are watching as far as our blood pressure and our sugar levels to make sure that nothing goes out of whack there, because we don't want to present with any additional complications that could exacerbate the situation.
But otherwise, the two of you had no underlying health problems prior to all this.
I am a cancer survivor, but basically, no, we were healthy, strong, enjoying life, doing everything we could to stay healthy.
I only, the problem with interviewing like this, Sue, is I just can't reach out and give you a hug.
Thank you, Benita. I feel it, though. I do. I feel it.
So this, I'm having this conversation, but we're going to use this as a health beat too. So I'll probably have to wrap it up here. I'm going to sign off, but don't disappear. So thank you for joining us for this edition of Health Beat. It's your health info on the go. We'll see you next time.